500 tons of fish, processed, sorted, frozen, and stacked, while the boat never stops moving. That number sounds like a warehouse operation, a factory floor, a refrigerated distribution center running 3 shifts. It is all of those things. Except it is also traveling through the North Atlantic at 12 miles per hour in 20-foot swells. Most people picture a fishing boat and think of a weathered crew hauling lines over the side. Maybe a hold packed with ice. Maybe a few hours out and back. What actually happens on a modern factory trawler is so far beyond that image it barely belongs in the same category. This is a floating food manufacturing plant, and from the moment the net breaks the surface, it runs like one. The net comes up first. A factory trawler's trawl net is not a fishing net in any sense you would recognize. It is a funnel of woven cable wide enough at the mouth to swallow a Boeing 747 sideways. It drags through the water column for hours, and when it finally surfaces, the cod end, the seal tail of the net, can be carrying anywhere from 20 tons to over 100 tons of fish in a single haul. 100 tons. That is the weight of 80 fully grown African elephants, compressed into a bag of netting, swinging over the stern of a ship in open ocean. The moment the catch hits the deck, a clock starts. Not a metaphorical clock, a biological one. Fish begin to deteriorate the instant they leave the water. Enzymes inside the muscle tissue start breaking down cell walls. Bacteria already present on the skin and in the gut accelerate. At sea surface temperatures, you have a window of roughly 90 minutes before the quality of that catch starts to fall in ways you cannot reverse. Every minute of delay between net and freezer is a minute of product loss. So the crew does not pause. The catch drops through deck grates and shoots directly into the processing deck below. The ship keeps moving. The net goes back in the water. And below the waterline, the factory comes alive. The processing deck sits beneath the main deck, running the full length of the hull. Stainless steel conveyor belts. Gutting machines the size of refrigerators running without stopping. Grading tables where workers in rubber aprons and waterproof gloves sort fish by species and size with movements so practiced, they barely look at what their hands are doing. The fish travel the length of that line in stages. Conveyor to gutting machine to washer to grading table to filleting station or blast freezer, depending on what the catch is and how it will be sold. A single industrial gutting machine on a factory trawler processes over 30 fish per minute, over 1,800 fish every hour from one machine alone. Most vessels run several simultaneously. The noise is constant. The pace never drops, and the ship is still moving the entire time. Every fish dropping into a gutting machine, every bag sealed and logged and sent down to the hold, all of it happening on a vessel cutting through open ocean, rolling in swells, pushing through weather that would shut down most work sites on land without a second thought. The crew on that processing deck is not standing on solid ground. They are standing on a floor that tilts and rises and falls beneath their feet for the entire length of the voyage. Rubber-soled boots, grip rails along every station, anti-fatigue mats bolted to the deck. The whole facility is engineered around the reality that the building it sits inside is never completely still. Here is the part that breaks your mental model completely. You almost certainly believe that fresh fish is better than frozen. It is one of those assumptions so deeply embedded in how we shop and eat that it never gets questioned. Fresh means quality. Frozen means compromise. Restaurants advertise fresh catches. Fish markets put out ice displays. But on a factory trawler, the fish going into the blast freezer 90 minutes after the net comes up is biologically superior to the fish labeled fresh at your grocery store counter. Not slightly. Significantly. Here is why. That fresh fish at the store spent 3 to 5 days in transit. Packed in ice on the vessel, transferred at port, loaded onto a refrigerated truck, delivered to a distribution center, transferred again, placed on display. Ice slows decay. It does not stop it. By the time you buy it, that fish has been deteriorating for the better part of a week. The fish frozen at sea hit a blast freezer running at minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit within the biological window. Cell structure intact. Enzymes halted. The moment of peak freshness locked in place. When it thaws, it is chemically closer to the moment of catch than anything that traveled on ice for 4 days ever could be. The freezer is not a compromise. On a factory trawler, the freezer is the entire point. A blast freezer on a factory trawler drops the core temperature of a fish from roughly 35 degrees Fahrenheit down to minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit in under 3 hours. That rate matters. Slow freezing forms large ice crystals inside the muscle tissue that rupture cell walls and ruin the texture when the fish thaws. Fast freezing at extreme cold forms tiny crystals that leave the structure intact. The fish comes out firm, clean, and preserved. The science is straightforward. The engineering required to run that process inside a moving ship in the middle of the ocean is not. The refrigeration systems on a large factory trawler are among the most complex mechanical systems on the vessel. Multiple compressor units, redundant cooling circuits, backup power systems. Because if the freezer goes down mid-voyage, you do not lose a batch, you lose the entire hold. Weeks of work and millions of dollars of product warming up in the dark, while the nearest port is still days away. The freezer hold sits deep in the hull, below the processing deck, below the waterline. At capacity, it holds enough frozen fish to stock the entire seafood section of a large supermarket every single week for 6 straight months, floor to ceiling, stacked in uniform blocks in vacuum-sealed bags, organized by species, grade, processing date, and whole location. Getting 500 tons into that space is a logistics operation running parallel to everything happening on the deck above. Every batch gets weighed, labeled, and assigned a specific location. Stacking sequence matters. Product frozen on day 1 needs to stay accessible without disturbing everything stacked on top of it on day 8. The hold is managed like a warehouse running a strict inventory system. Because that is exactly what it is. Cold chain records run continuously. Temperature logs are generated around the clock. If any section of the hold drifts 2 degrees outside specification, it gets flagged automatically and documented. Not because someone might notice, because international regulation requires it. By the time that fish reaches a buyer at port, it carries a complete documented history. Where it was caught, the date and time it was processed, the temperature it was held at, and for how long. Every bag in that hold is traceable back to a specific haul, on a specific day, at a specific coordinate in the ocean. The crew running all of this works in shifts, around the clock, for weeks at a time. A large factory trawler carries anywhere from 30 to over 100 crew members. Processing workers rotate through 6-hour shifts on the factory deck. Engineers monitor the freezer systems, the main engines, and the hydraulics on the net hauling gear. The bridge team watches the fish finder, the weather radar, and the charts. The ship never sleeps. The net goes back in the water, while the last haul is still moving through the processing line below. The factory deck runs continuously, whether it is noon or 3 in the morning, whether the sea is flat or throwing 15-foot waves across the stern. Fatigue management on these vessels is a regulated discipline for the same reason it is regulated in aviation. A processing worker 6 hours into a shift on a rolling deck, handling industrial equipment in wet conditions, needs structured rest before coming back. Crew rotation schedules are not suggestions. They are operational safety requirements. Stability becomes a critical engineering concern once the hold starts filling. 500 tons of frozen product settling into the lower hull changes how the vessel sits in the water and how it responds to wave action. A ship that handled comfortably at the start of the voyage handles differently with a full hold. Ballast tanks are adjusted continuously throughout the trip to compensate, keeping the center of gravity in the right place and preventing the vessel from becoming dangerously top-heavy when heavy weather arrives. Naval architects who design factory trawlers spend significant time modeling exactly this scenario. A fully loaded hull in a North Atlantic winter storm is one of the most demanding structural environments in commercial maritime operation. The steel in the hull, the welds in the hold, the securing systems for 500 tons of frozen product, all of it engineered around what happens when a loaded vessel meets a force 9 gale in open water. Because that is not a hypothetical. That is a Tuesday. By the time the vessel finally turns for port, most of the catch has already been frozen for days. The processing deck has run through dozens of individual hulls. The hold is packed. What looked like an impossible number at the start of the voyage, 500 tons, processed at sea on a moving ship, got done one batch at a time, one shift at a time, one haul at a time, with a system precise enough that the fish frozen on day 1 is still within full regulatory specification when the ship ties up 2 weeks later. The factory just happens to have a hull and a propeller. And here's what that means for your daily life. The pollock in a fast food fish sandwich, the frozen cod fillet in the supermarket freezer case, the surimi inside the imitation crab at a sushi counter. Somewhere behind almost all of it is a factory trawler that processed that fish at sea, in motion, in conditions that would shut down most industrial operations on land. The frozen seafood section of your grocery store is not a storage solution. It is the final stop of a cold chain that started inside the hull of a ship moving through open ocean. What happens after the ship docks is its own engineering problem entirely. 500 tons of frozen fish arrives at a port offloading facility. Within 48 hours, portions of it will be on a refrigerated shelf 1,200 miles inland. Every link in the chain, the trucks, the distribution centers, the last mile refrigerated cases, runs on systems most people never think about once in their lives. The next video breaks down exactly how a refrigerated truck keeps a frozen load at -10 degrees Fahrenheit while crossing a desert highway in July. The engineering behind